Hello, we're back for chapter 22 of To MILELE. If you're with me for chapter 21, wow, that was a chapter that to me is a real blessing. It's a blessed chapter. I hope the entire book is a blessed book, but that chapter is wow. Okay, so we'll recap chapter 21 before I go on to 22. So we went into Jennies with Hope, who was there with Prince Adani. Now she viewed Jennies through veiled eyes. This place is too much for her eyes to capture, and so the people there, the place, it's sort of muted for her, but yet she was able to view the Sky Kingdom, and it was glorious even in its muted fashion. And she was able to view MILELE, a place of the damned, a place for people who basically did not choose the sovereigns, who rejected the sovereigns, and they couldn't really, after they died, could not really be in Jennies because they wouldn't be able to exist there because of their very essence. It was not compatible with Jennies, the place of the sovereigns. And she met Phileo and Storge, who were her guides while she was there when Prince Adani was absent. She also met her uncle, who she had not met in real life, and also her deceased parents. It was an interesting way how Prince Adani helped her to greet them. What else? She learned that eventually the Sky Kingdom would be brought down to a new Earth that Prince Adani would create, and eventually, and that those who she represented as the bride, which would be those who chose him, the loyals, would also live in that kingdom with the prince as his part of his bride. And we learned that the world spirit talks is part of who the watcher listens to. And the world spirit, okay, let me give you an insight. The word Velchgis, which we have been struggling over saying, the ruling body that is basically had given the vial to humans in exchange for the key, and who is the power behind Keiko and the Council of Nations. Velchgis is a German term meaning world spirit. Okay. Let's see, what else can we say? The Prince Adani and Kate and Agios are often referred to, if you haven't picked up on it by now, as one, capital O-N-E, or the other, especially by the watcher who doesn't want to mention their name. So he refers to them as one or the other, same as he refers to Hope as the island princess. And of course, we don't know who the watcher is yet. Prince Adani acknowledged while Hope was in Jennies that she is his betrothed, the representative of all the peoples who chose him. And I think that's pretty much it. We learned a lot of behind the scenes things. Oh, we also learned that Tsabe was in fact the Watcher's master, also behind Keiko's bodyguard. And I did tell you to do something with that name. I don't know if you did or not, but we'll catch it in another reading. So let's move on to chapter 22. Okay, chapter 22. We are on the Mediterranean Sea. And we left Nathan just experiencing a storm after he was finally relieved of being seasick. So here we are. It seemed as though the storm had been raging for hours, though in reality it had only been less than half an hour. Sitting on the side of his bed, Nathan could see outside Nathan could see outside his room's ship porthole. It was pitch black. Battering rain pelted the glass, and streaks of lightning intermittently brightened the otherwise gloomy scene. Faith turned from looking out at the darkness and stared at him worriedly. She had entered the room a few minutes ago to check on him. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked, for what seemed the 10th time. Excuse me. Bracing himself with both hands against the mattress, Nathan smiled reassuringly. "I'm fine. Please don't worry." She eyed him suspiciously. "You're not just saying that so I won't worry." He wanted to laugh. Of course he didn't want her to worry. He would have lied if he was unwell, but in truth, he felt good. After all, not seeing her all morning and being confined to his room, he now felt a little giddy in her presence. With her side pressed against the wall by the porthole and one hand braced against Judah's bedhead, she exuded mystery and adventure. Her dark wavy hair, unusually bound, hung loosely around her shoulders, swinging with every movement of the vessel. He felt drawn to her. This isn't good, Nathan thought. His heart was racing, and it wasn't because of the storm. Then the room dipped and swayed. He felt dizzy. This was from the storm. He yelled, "Maybe you should sit." Faith shoved away from the wall, but instead of landing on Judah's bed, she started toward him. Just as she had almost reached him, the cargo ship lurched, and she was propelled forward. When her weight suddenly hit him, Nathan fell backwards on the bed. His arms instinctively reached out to grab her with no time to think of the implications. Almost immediately, the gales outside started abating, but the storm within Nathan's heart had magnified. Faith quickly lifted her head. Her eyes were wide. They stared at each other for a moment. Then Faith braced her hands on the bed to push herself off. As if by its own volition, Nathan's right hand swiftly reached up to grab the back of her head. He pulled her head down and kissed her. Faith immediately pushed away from him, shock in her eyes. She scrambled backwards off the bed. Nathan sat up. It wasn't the resurgence of the storm that sent him flying backwards across the bed. After a moment to catch his breath, Nathan sat up again, hand to his throbbing left jaw. He looked at the door that had just been slammed shut after she had stormed out. How could a girl pack such a wallop? The closed door gave him no answer. Poor Nathan got decked. Eden 2. Propped on the edge of Hope's bed, Ruth watched silently as her friend woke out of a deep sleep. Now remember that Hope has been returned from Jennies by the one or the other, or Prince Adani. Ruth watched silently as her friend woke out of a deep sleep. The dark lashes fanning the tops of Hope's cheeks trembled slightly. Her eyelids fluttered up. Her gaze met Ruth's. "You're finally awake," Ruth said, feeling relieved. "I was debating whether or not to call for Dr. Mark." "Dr. Mark? Why?" Hope seemed genuinely puzzled. "You don't remember?" Ruth waited, hardly believing the blank look on Hope's face. "Anything?" But perhaps it was understandable, since Ruth herself still found it hard to explain the midnight trek to the mist patch, then finding herself back in bed without remembering how she'd returned there. Hope's amber gaze fixed on the ceiling as if trying to recall something. Then she suddenly sat up, hair in disarray, eyes frantic. Her knuckles paled as she gripped the bed covers. She looked at Ruth. Ruth, where did I go? Where did he take me? Where did he go? You do remember. Hope's brow furrowed, and she nodded repeatedly. I remember. She looked up, lost. Oh, I can't remember where, but I remember him. Suddenly, she shoved the covers aside and swung her legs over the side of the bed, nearly displacing Ruth. I remember him, Prince Adani. She glanced around the room, then back at Ruth. Did you see him? Is he still here? Ruth didn't answer. Hope grabbed Ruth's hands. Is he here? Ruth shook her head. He's not here. Hope's eyes filled with tears. A desperate sob escaped. Why is he not here? Why did he come and then leave? Why didn't he keep me there? She swallowed the sobs, then suddenly stood up, pulling Ruth to her feet. Where is Agios? Let's find him. Agios was already here. What? Ruth gently pushed Hope back to the side of the bed. Here, sit down, calm down, and I'll tell you. She sat beside Hope, facing her. Agios came while you were still asleep. He said you would remember going through the patch, that you would know you'd been somewhere else, but nothing more. Also, that you would remember the prince. I do remember him, Hope exclaimed, tightly gripping Ruth's hands. He also said that you would have a knowing of things that had happened without really remembering. Do you understand? Ruth wasn't even sure she herself understood. Hope thought for a moment with a faraway look. Her eyes gradually focused and slowly filled with awareness. Yes, I do understand, she sighed, letting go of Ruth's hands. I remember one more thing. What's that? Ruth asked. A hand. I remember a hand. New scene. Gideon lowered, just in case you're wondering, of course the hand was Phileo's hand that had solidified for her while she was in Jennies. New scene. Gideon lowered his binoculars and stood in companionable silence with Agent Mike, looking out at the ocean by Agri 1. Tension radiated from the big man by his side. A little tune bubbled up in Gideon, and he let it out, humming, then whistling softly. Something to ease the tension. But the tension would be impossible to displace. Just at the edge of Eden 2's clear airspace, the Council of Nations' enormous warship remained enthroned in its position on the water. The world envoy was on board. The continued entrance of smaller assault ships and boats had ceased the day before. Gideon guessed their full entourage was complete. Fighter jets on aircraft carriers remained stationary. The waters were calm. The vessels were still, but the people on them were constantly moving, maintaining a charged air of potential war. Gideon's whistling gradually faded. Our guys are on edge. He looked around at the men and women in military gear stationed strategically along the cliff and coast. Indeed, Agent Mike agreed. Gideon grunted, looking at him. The guy was tense all right, but didn't seem worried. Instead, he looked like he could go meet the enemy all by himself. Rein it in, Gideon commanded in jest. Agent Mike looked over at him. His lips tipped at one corner. Then suddenly his expression changed, displacing the half smile. Go. The voice from behind startled Gideon. He turned. It was Agios. He was looking beyond them to the scene below. Go. Tell him the hour has not yet come. His weight upon the water will accomplish nothing. Before Gideon could react, Agent Mike was already racing down the cliff, heading for one of the patrol boats. Gideon turned to Agios. "You're sending him alone?" "He needs no one, but go with him and leave your weapons here." "What?" "Go with him, then you will understand." After boarding the patrol boat, Gideon looked back to shore. Agios was nowhere to be seen. "Seriously," he mumbled to himself. "Only two of us, no weapons, and he disappears." Still, he took some comfort from the sight of even two soldiers spread along the island and in patrol boats, ready and willing. Some minutes later, their boatmen steered their boat close to the bow of the main warship. Seabirds circled lazily overhead, and the stench of fuel filled Gideon's nostrils. He could feel the intense scrutiny of the Council of Nations forces. "Stop worrying." Gideon looked at Agent Mike's broad back. He yelled above the boat's motor. "Shansi, what is it about Agios that even a guy like you will obey him without question?" Agent Mike turned his head. He grinned. "Obeying Ambassador Agios is obeying Prince Adani, is obeying Emperor Agape." "Aga what?" Agent Mike ignored him. They had reached their destination. "Let's go," Agent Mike called out, moving rapidly across the boat, heading for the ship's ladder. After the challenging climb aboard, they faced a small company of soldiers in pea suits, weapons ready. Gideon stood beside his comrade, hands raised. Agent Mike's arms stayed at his side, but his fists were clenched. In a calm, strong voice, Agent Mike announced, "I have a message for the envoy." Gideon didn't even wonder why Agios had sent Agent Mike. Agios didn't always follow protocol, and Gideon was pretty convinced that Agent Mike was not an ordinary man. As much as the island had accepted him, everyone silently acknowledged that something was different about him. The news of the Silver Plains and Agent Mike's near twin was still circulating on Eden too. Who were they, really? The thoughts evaporated from Gideon's mind at the appearance of the envoy's bodyguard. Like the parting of the waters, the soldiers moved aside as the giant man strode through their midst. He stopped a few paces from Gideon and Agent Mike. Even through his helmet's visor, his baleful glare could be seen and felt. Whoever Agent Mike and the silver-suited men were, they were more fit to deal with a demigod like Desave. "I asked for the envoy," Agent Mike said. His tone had shifted considerably from calm to combative. "What you have to tell him is really meant for me," Desave's voice croaked out, rasping and gravelly, filled with malice and anger. "As you well know." Gideon was dumbstruck. The creature had actually spoken. "Nevertheless, in this dimension, I will speak with him." The tension from Agent Mike was palpable. Desave took a step forward. His pea suit stretched over the muscular bulges of his arms, chest, and thighs. His pent-up anger barely contained. "You are not above me, Michael." Desave took another step, then another and another. "Speak to me." In that same instant, Agent Mike shoved Gideon aside with one arm, nearly knocking him over, while he blocked the force of Desave's sudden and vicious attack. Gideon grabbed the ship's rail, breaking his fall. The other soldiers seemed frozen, riveted by the unexpected scene unfolding before them. Desave was a head taller than Agent Mike, but that seemed to be the only advantage. Every punch, kick, or body thrust from Desave was effectively blocked. His rage-filled shouts echoed across the water as he continued to inflict endless blows, thudding on his opponent. Gideon was speechless. It was martial arts as he had never seen it. It was much more powerful, more intricate, more... While Tasabe's attacks were complex and very powerful, Agent Mike parried those attacks like art, even more riveting. His movements looked effortless, more controlled, as if they were something he could do with his eyes closed. Suddenly, the gathered soldiers moved aside, creating a path. Envoy Bays was on the scene, with 2 new officers by his side. It was the first time Gideon was seeing the envoy in a pea suit. It seemed that now his ability to tolerate Eden 2's atmosphere had completely vanished. No wonder he was so impatient to remove Hope from the island. At the appearance of the world envoy, the tone of the 2-man battle changed. Instead of mostly defensive combat, Angel Mike suddenly pushed forward in a flurry of wit and skill. Relentlessly, he threw blow after blow that the bigger man couldn't withstand. Finally, he shoved a palm strike to Tasabe's abdomen, causing the bigger man to double over, grunting. Agent Mike ended the fight with a flying kick that sent Tasabe bouncing off the side of the main deck gun, leaving his headgear askew. Tasabe lay still, his sides heaving ragged breaths. A visible crack ran down the center of his helmet. Agent Mike stood over him. "You left your original place eons ago, Dragon, a place you will never occupy again." Agent Mike glared down at him for a moment longer, then turned away. Dragon? Why does he call him that? Gideon wondered. As Agent Mike walked by him, Gideon noticed that he'd barely broken a sweat and his breathing was still fairly even. He gave Gideon a questioning look, which Gideon answered with a grin and nod, showing that he suffered no injury from the earlier shove. "Mr. Envoy," Agent Mike greeted, now standing before Envoy Bays. Even through the helmet's visor, Gideon could make out a bewildered expression on the envoy's face. He was studying Agent Mike as if trying to figure him out. Slowly, the bewildered expression changed to bemusement. "Did you have to beat him that badly?" Envoy Bays asked, cocking his head to one side. "He's not used to defeat, you know." He turned to the officer on his left. "Get him tended to." "Yes, sir." The officer ordered 2 other soldiers over to Tasabe, but he growled at them and shrugged them off. They looked at Envoy Baines. "Or not," said the envoy, jokingly. How does he find anything funny at a time like this? Gideon wondered, watching Tasabe struggle to his feet. The bodyguard's ragged breathing increased as he gasped for air that his headgear no longer held concentrated for him. He stumbled forward away from them, while the 2 assigned men followed cautiously. "What do you want with me, officer?" "I'm sorry, I don't know how to address you." The envoy's tone was now serious. "Who I am is not important. My message is," said Agent Mike. "Your message? From whom?" "Ambassador Agios." "Oh, him." Envoy Bays turned aside, looking toward the island. "All right, what is it?" "He says your wait here will accomplish nothing. Go home." At first, there was a long, drawn-out silence. Then quiet laughter floated from the headgear, rocking Envoy Bays back and forth in a rhythmic motion. "I will accomplish nothing?" He glared at Agent Mike. "Accomplish nothing, you say?" Contempt now laced his words. "That man or thing or whatever he is has never seen eye to eye with me. He's a complete Adani lackey and he's holding that woman captive. She belongs to me. She belongs to the world." He leaned into Agent Mike. "Listen to me good, officer whoever. I will not leave. Not until she boards the ship. Tell that to him and to the governor. And tell her," he laughed, "I will soon have her brother in hand." Agent Mike remained rock still, gazed fixed on the envoy. Suddenly, Envoy Baze stepped back as if stung. Gideon looked at Agent Mike. What? What had happened, he wondered. Agent Mike suddenly turned. Let's go, he flung at Gideon. They will reap the consequences. Okay, so the battle is on. So we're leaving chapter 22 with that confrontation between Agent Mike and Desabe and the world envoy Keiko. Until next time, see you for chapter 23. Take care.